Hi, so in this presentation, we're going to be trying to bring it back together again. So we've talked about Tourette syndrome and coprolalia. We've talked about aphasia and the fact that aphasics can still swear, and hopefully we've gotten at that a little bit, the fact that aphasics can still swear even when their left hemisphere has been, their language center in the left hemisphere has been damaged, is probably because of the cross-referencing in the right hemisphere and with having to do with the limbic system. Now, we've also found, though, with some aphasics, you get uncontrollable swearing, and with, for example, Alzheimer's patients, you can get uncontrollable swearing. Now, we're going to try to understand all of that, taking into consideration what we know about swearing and the limbic system. So, the first thing we can say is that when there is brain damage to the limbic system, primarily to the amygdala, then we're likely to get coprolalia. So the amygdala, again, what it does is kind of regulates emotions. So it regulates our response to emotions by providing that link from the limbic system to our cortex, from the emotional brain to our rational brain. And this seems to be the case, especially with swearing among the elderly. And this is a well-known phenomenon that with elderly, they will often begin swearing in ways that they were never known to swear before, where suddenly a person in their 80s might just develop this incredibly foul mouth. Well, that seems to be the result of some sort of damage to the amygdala. Could be caused by Alzheimer's, but it could also be caused by a stroke or some other brain damage. And so with aphasics who have uncontrollable swearing, not the aphasics that swear in a reasonable way, they're frustrated and they start swearing, but that makes sense. But these are people who just swear for what appears to be no reason, which is, seems to be more true coprolalia. That is probably because there's more than just damage to the language centers. There's probably also damage to the limbic system, the amygdala, where they're not able to regulate their responses. The amygdala also is probably responsible for what's going on with Tourette syndrome and coprolalia, but in a different way. And we know very little about what's going on with Tourette syndrome in the brain. But here's one hypothesis, and that is that Tourette syndrome is sort of an impulse control disorder, where one thought on that is that the limbic system basically sends too many commands, that there's too much going on there, and one of those commands among a small percentage of Touretters may be swear, right? Like you could be getting this command, say fuck, say fuck, say fuck, say fuck. And most of us, right, we have impulses, but we can put a damper on them. And let me give you an example, and I hope this doesn't say too much about me as a person, but I know I get weird impulses sometimes. I'll be riding on the bus, for example, and there'll be somebody sitting in front of me minding their own business, and I get this impulse to just kind of smack them in the back of the head for no real reason. I don't have any reason to want to smack them in the back of the head, but, I have that impulse just to kind of see what's going to happen. I don't do it, but I kind of want to. And, and the same thing with language, where sometimes I'll get this impulse just to walk up to some stranger and say, "You fucking idiot," just to see how they would respond to that. Well, again, I have a normally functioning brain that can tell me, hey, that's not appropriate, don't do that. But imagine if that command is just coming again and again and again, and it just won't give you any relief, saying, you gotta say it, you gotta say it, you gotta say it. Well, eventually you have to give in to that. So what's happening is maybe there's just too many commands coming from the limbic system in the Tourette brain, and the amygdala can't regulate all of them. The last thing I want to say is that individuals with severe right brain trauma right? So we've been talking mostly about the left brain trauma, but imagine if you had right brain trauma, a stroke, or a blow to the head on the right side of the brain. What they find is that those people rarely swear, that those people don't seem to swear, and what seems to be is that they don't have the same emotions. Their emotions aren't developing normally, and so they don't have any emotions to process, which means that there's no reason for the brain to want to select taboo words as their choice, because one of the main reasons for choosing the taboo words is because of the emotions involved. There may be other reasons as well. As we've talked about, there may be social reasons, although those social reasons may also be regulated there on the right side of the brain. All right, well, I know these answers aren't fully satisfactory, but it's the nature of science. We're learning these things, and we have a long ways to go to understand what's going on with Tourette's, and what's going on with aphasia, and what's going on with the brain in general. So hopefully this gives you kind of an idea of what we find.